So let's jump into yet again another Transformers Slag podcast Patreon listener question. Once again, if you're interested in being part of the Transformers Slag Patreon, come join us. Let us know that we're doing a good job. Support the podcast. Patreon.com/Protoman. I'll post it in the description below and the pinned comment. We got a lot of cool stuff if you come join us. We'll have your name put in the end credits goal of every segment. You could have access to the Transformers Slag Podcast Patreon Discord, which we have. I mean, I love our Discord. We have so many people there. We have great conversations. And within that Discord, we post all kinds of sales threads and stuff to have people save money in this hobby. Find all the deals online. We have our lore section where we show off all kinds of cool Transformers lore and rare translated content and everything like that I share in that subsection. And of course, depending on what tier you are in the patronage, you get a little gift in the mail once in a while. I'm actually in talks right now to have a whole bunch of custom deluxe scale heads 3D printed to be sent out to all my higher tier patrons as another little extra gift in the mail. And of course, you also get to be part of the Patreon listener question. So, we have a great Patreon listener question from the Spider Monkey, all the way in Australia. I love Australia. Spider Monkey wants to know, and this guy is the man. I have a question for a listener question. Do you think Hasbro will ever fully embrace the Transformers Masterforce and Transformers Victory line of characters in the future for the toy line, rather than just dip their toe in with the odd figure here and there? Could we see Japanese-made characters become more mainstream in the future? So thank you for the question, Spider Monkey, and thank you for being such an awesome supporter of the podcast. When it comes to the Hasbro side of things, unfortunately, a lot has changed. One thing that has been consistent, number one, which always has been a hurdle, is trademarks, but I'll jump into that in a moment. But one thing that has changed recently, and I want to say it was around the time of Power of the Primes, which Hasbro kind of to want to create this synergy that whatever comes out in the American side or the Japanese side is shared between the two brands, and there's very little change between them. There isn't going to be many unique one-of-a-kind molds that won't be available on both sides of the ocean, nor will there be not too many rare one-of-a-kind paint schemes. Yeah, there's the odd masterpiece here and there and some high-end items, and the Generation Selects line also has kind of the same thing, but even those are getting opportunities through Hasbro Pulse and stuff like that. So that door is closing more and more. But part of the problem with that is because there's that synergy between the two regions, you're dealing with one country that has no trademark issues, which is that of Japan, where they could pretty much name anything, and they more or less could get away with it. They could have a Transformer character named, Gundam. The only reason why they don't do that is because they know about, brand recognition, and why would they do that? Why would they advertise their opponent Bandai's, top-tier brand or anything like that? So they usually, there's not a big issue with trademarks like it is over here in the United States. And the reason why I bring that up is because Hasbro, most of the characters that they have, like you said here, dipped their toe into, were trademarks that they kind of dealt with and are comfortable with using over and over. Metal Hawk was one of those examples. We saw Metal Hawk used quite a few times on the Western side already, whether it be a decoy armor or in a little box set. I mean, it technically goes all the way back to Bakon, where the first Metal Hawk was trademarked for Bakon, and then they used it for another box set with Big Bad Toy Store, and I believe it was a Toys R Us exclusive too here in Canada. And then they used it again for the decoy armor little pretender shell thingy. So that was a trademark that they had, and they run with it. And here's a Masterforce character. And chances are they're probably going to run with it more in the future, so we'll probably see another Metal Hawk at some point in our lifetime in the Western side of things. Then you have characters like Black Shadow, who is the pretender shell gangsta in Transformers Victory. They were like, well, we want to do something with that character, and since they have that Sky Shadow trademark that has literally been kicking around since the Beast Wars era, And they just throw that Sky Shadow trademark on all kinds of different unrelated characters, whether it be a Cybertron mold, a Beast Wars mold, or whatever. It gets thrown on the Black Shadow character once in a while. It's been done twice in the past already. And then characters like Overlord, that they've really kind of hitched their wagon to that trademark, and they're going to use it more in the future. And again, that kind of dials it all the way back to where BotCon was like, hey, we want to do Overlord. They couldn't get the trademark at the time, so they did Gigatron, which was his trademark, which throws back to the old Heroes of Cybertron PVC. It's all this complicated trademark stuff that is what gets in the way of us getting a Minerva figure, essentially, or like Star Saber. Man, what a complicated trademark that is. Combined with the fact that we started getting used to the name Star Saber because of a Minicon 3-pack character. Then there was complications because they stopped wanting to use the Star Saber name and then calling it Energon Saber or something like that because they didn't like the brand cognitiveness with here's Star Wars with lightsaber and Star Saber. Like there was that whole weird argument that I heard from a Hasbro panel, I think it was like BotCon 2014, where they were asking hey, if we'll ever see Star Saber, and they're saying, well, we're going to run maybe with the Wing Saber trademark, and then that trademark has since expired, and then they're like, maybe Victory Saber, and they put that on a Robot Heroes figure, which never got released, so they didn't have to do the trademark ultimately in the end. A lot of complicated stuff with that. So it really is, when we look now, we go, okay, Masterforce and Victory characters, right? So outside of the ones that have what I call complicated same mold, same paint scheme synergy, and what I mean by that is there's a lot of Masterforce characters that have American equivalencies, like Lander, the Pretender character in Masterforce, is Landmine over here. We have the Landmine trademark. We could do a Landmine Pretender shell character. It's actually been done through the Power of the Prime's decoy armors. So those could kind of happen. Same thing, like maybe at some point we will see, Sirens, aka Ghost Shooter, maybe done in white, obviously, or, there's certain ones that I could potentially see brought over here just because of their Western names being something that's a little more doable. But when you get to stuff like Deathsaurus, or when you get to stuff like Dinoking, it gets complicated because it's like, do they want to trademark Dinoking? And then are they ever going to use it again? And then are they going to trademark the individual robot names, which are going to be a whole other complicated thing? And keep in mind, each trademark costs them money, and they have to use it. And if they don't use it a second time, if they renew it after the 4-year stint, they get fined. There's all kinds of complicated stuff with that. It's something that they tested the waters with it when they did the Lio Kaiser Combiner Wars box set. They made a whole bunch of new trademarks and everything like that. They put out that box set. It didn't really sell very well. Granted, it was, it was a limited run kind of thing, but even then it wasn't really well received. It kind of served a purpose just to kind of get more repaints out of those Combiner War molds, especially that of the Skylynx mold that really didn't have a lot of repaint potential, unfortunately. And it just didn't go anywhere. And then, of course, you had Deathsaurus with the name, and they were trying to figure out where we could stick that and stuff. It got complicated. And all those trademarks and all that stuff, and all those trademarks had rolled over and expired by then. And it's something where, do they want to go the Deathsaurus route or the Deathsaurus route or do that again? That's where it gets complicated. If all of that trademark stupidity didn't exist, then I would say yes. I would say Hasbro has no problem doing a subline of, let's say 5 to 12 characters of Transformer Victory stuff. And hey, here's 4 Brain Masters, and here's a whole bunch of Dinoking members, and here's, and all these loose trademarks. They could go, here's Blacker, Blaster, and Braver, and never use those trademarks again, and they don't have to worry about it. But we live in a different side of the globe where it's so what's the word I'm looking for? Copyright oriented, that it's dependent on that kind of stuff. And because of it, it makes it so complicated to get new characters, while we're going to see a lot of the same characters over and over because they want to keep those trademarks. The the best example I always give is that time going from Generation 2's Hasbro into Beast Wars' Kenner, where Transformers was at such a low at that point, from leaving G2 and going into Beast Wars, that they didn't care. And yeah, they were going to keep some trademarks and throw some other trademarks around from their other brands onto other stuff like My Little Pony and G.I. Joe. But we went into Beast Wars where more than 70% of that line was brand new trademarks and brand new characters because they had nothing to lose. Transformers is such a different brand today than it was during, that 95, 96 era of Beast Wars, where they were just hoping to throw something at the wall and it would stick at a big low period, that today they just want to hold on to everything and play it safe. And I always say sometimes you should wish that Transformers doesn't do well, because when they don't do well, then they have to innovate. Then they have to figure out a way to power that rocket in a different way. And the second that rocket stops flying, they got to change the fuel. And I kind of wanted in a lot of ways to enter that kind of realm. It'll be bad for business. It'll be bad for the fandom. We might not, it might go really sour, but there's also that chance that risk could lead to great reward. And we get new characters, new ideas, new products. There's been a few eras of Transformers where that has happened, where there was big shakeups, and those big shakeups led to really good things, where the safe way was something like Generation 2, using the same molds that were proven in the past, same IPs and trademarks that were proven in the past, and it was unexciting to people. Granted, Generation 2 had a lot of other difficulty, like Power Rangers coming out around the same time and just totally taking away all the attention from that and becoming a worldwide brand in that debut year of 93. But the point is that G2 is kind of a warning to Hasbro in a lot of ways, that you could only ride that horse so many times until kids and, in all honesty, collectors get bored and put their money elsewhere. Even adult Transformer collectors, the fear that they could have is that one day they go, you know what, I think I'm going to start spending more money on these Ninja Turtles, or I'm going to spend, they're going to put their money into other hobbies, and they're buying less Transformers. And if they lose one or two guys, that could be, potentially right there, $400 a month they could be losing from an individual that would have been buying their product. And now they put it into other stuff. So yeah, I kind of went off the rails a little there a bit, but what I'm trying to say is that we could see Masterforce and Victory in the future, but there really has to be a lot of different stars that have to align for something like that to happen. Even in the like you said here, the toe dipped in the water process, where once in a while we get a character. Even the once in a while, like I would love it if Road Caesar, the Combiner team, had a modern release at some point, but that's a trademark that Hasbro would have to invest in. Road Caesar, Blacker, Braver, Laster, Brainmasters, whatever, those 5 trademarks right there, if they want to even hitch their wagon to those. And that's where all of a sudden the dream starts to become less of a reality when you think about would Hasbro want to do that. And it's sad. I mean, at the flip side of it is, yeah, you could use some facsimile names like, oh, we're not going to use, Braver. We're going to call them, and then you just go through the Hasbro list of names and go, haven't used Road Hugger in a while because that Micromaster is probably not going to see anything. I mean, they could do that too, but sometimes I feel that's not good for the IP of the brand in a lot of ways. I find that if anything, it just creates more confusion. That was kind of the problem that they had when they were doing the modulators, where it's like, oh, that thing's Ironworks, but that thing is Ironworks. No, that's Iron Tread. Oh, but then what was that before? Well, in the history of so when you start creating that kind of brand synergy, it creates all kinds of weird things. And the one thing with Transformers, it's all about the characters. And the second you start confusing that with people, especially when it comes to customers that aren't like hardcore like we are, that really know, like, oh, that character's named that, but he's not really. That character's named Mega Octane, but it's not really Mega Octane. It's actually, Onslaught, but ignore the name Mega Octane. Or that character's named Tankor, but it's not really Tankor. It's actually Octane. It's I can only imagine how confusing it must be for newcomers to the hobby. when it comes to all those trademark headaches. Where when we go to the Japanese side of things, none of that is a problem. And that's why, like, we had Masterpiece Star Saber, and it never got a Western release because it just wasn't in the books. It couldn't have been done. They could have probably trademarked Star Saber, but at the same time, they probably didn't have confidence in it. And it goes on and on. So I feel we still will get something. I really do. I really do. If you're someone that's a fan of those two series, and maybe even to bleed over a little more, let's say Transformers Zone, we probably will still get like Takara Tomy mall exclusive repaints of stuff, but probably not original, probably not original paint schemes and not paint schemes, molds of things. I don't know. It's a tough one because trust me, I'm in the same boat as you. I love those series and I would love new figures of those characters, and everything that we've gotten up to this point that has the name Metal Hawk, Sky Shadow, aka Black Shadow, Overlord. I've always picked up those characters because I just love those characters and love to support them. Literally on my desk, no joke, I'm holding it right now, is an extra of the Pretender shell of Metal Hawk. Just because it's like to be in this day and age where there was a Western release of a somewhat Pretender shell Power of the Primes decoy armor Metal Hawk. Like, wow. And sure, it's not 100% what I would wanted. I wanted something a little more, bigger price point, but it's better than nothing, and it shows that there is a potential for something in the future, at least with that character. So let's hope. Let's hope. I mean, let's put it this way. If you had a choice of one, and that's what I could put this out there to the audience and to you, Spider Monkey, who asked the question. If you could have at least one, Hasbro's going to trademark one name and they're going to run with it. Outside of the ones that I've listed previously already here that Hasbro does have, who would it be? And after that one is done, what do you do with that trademark afterwards with that 4-year rollover? You know what I mean? Let's say they could just ignore it, let it expire, and that was a one and done. But that's a waste of time and their money. They really want to keep it because when you trademark a name, you don't have to pay for it again when you're re-registering it. It's yours as long as you keep doing something with it, and that's the beauty of it. So the question is, who do you hitch your wagon to? Are you going to go, you know what? I have a lot of confidence in Deathsaurus, and I feel every 4 years we could put out some kind of product with Deathsaurus. Is it one of the Brain Masters? Is it a Transformers Victory character or a Zone character? Or, do you feel like, you know what? We could do an Autobot Medic Minerva. That's what her trademark will be, because Minerva must be a nightmare to trademark. But let's say Medic Minerva. And we're so confident that we could probably do a Medic Minerva figure of some kind or some kind of product every 4 years to justify having that trademark. Like, who would it be? What would it be? How could you see it? That's kind of the question now I pose to everyone out here, because in all honesty, that's where it gets complicated. It really does. And at the end of the day, as much as I would love to see it, the way that the current ecosystem is right now with Transformers and how they do trademarks and stuff, until we enter a point where they need to change things up because things aren't selling, which from what we could tell, it's still doing good enough to keep moving forward. Product is still moving and everything's fine. We're going to have to wait and see. So again, thank you for the super chat, aka Patreon listener question, aka awesome stuff to support the podcast, Spider Monkey. Thanks again for everything. And if you want to be like Spider Monkey and join the Patreon, patreon.com/protoman, and check us out. I'll have it posted in the description and in the pinned comment below. And let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this question, because there's a lot of layers to this, from a business side and from a fan side, that need to be addressed.